Now we turn to the situation in Ukraine. Russian attacks on the east and the south of Ukraine killed at least 3 people this Wednesday. The news was confirmed by officials in Kyiv as the call was repeated for more Patriot air defense systems to battle a surge in Moscow's missile strikes. Russia also attacked Kharkiv with a series of strikes for the first time since 2022, killing at least 1 civilian and wounding 16 others.
Here in Kharkiv, in northeastern Ukraine, this building's windows were blown out and its balconies destroyed after a deadly Russian strike. Local residents were shaken by the blast.
It was quiet, and then something hissed. It got dark, and there was dust in my eyes. I felt a blow to my head. Then the dust settled, and we ran out into the corridor. We saw that there were no windows, and the doors were broken.
According to the regional governor, 14 buildings were damaged in total, and 2 residential buildings and a medical institution were partially destroyed. Local officials said that Russia may have used a new type of guided bomb in the strikes. Russia did not immediately address the remarks. As he condemned the attack, President Zelensky called on Ukraine's allies to hasten deliveries of warplanes and Patriot air defense systems.
Bolstering Ukraine's air defense and expediting the delivery of F-16s to Ukraine are vital tasks. There are no rational explanations for why Patriots, which are plentiful around the world, are still not covering the skies of Kharkiv and other cities.
During more than 2 years of conflict, Kharkiv and the surrounding region have regularly been struck by drones and missiles. Some of the attacks have led to blackouts.
Charlotte Hughes there. Let's get the analysis and bring in Sergey Radchenko, international political expert, visiting professor at the University of Cardiff, among other places. Sergey Radchenko, very much an expert on the issues we're going to talk about. And thank you, sir, for being with us on France 24. We appreciate your time. Can we start with Kyiv calling for more air defense systems? How essential, can you underline this for us, how essential is it that these weapons are provided to Ukraine in order to continue its resistance against Russia's advance?
Well, right. This has been a long time standing request from the Ukrainian government to continue providing air defense systems for Kyiv, but also other Ukrainian systems, because cities. Remember what the Russians are doing. The Russians are trying to infrastructure and wear down the morale of the Ukrainian people. So in order to resist Russian aggression, first and foremost, what Ukrainians need is air defense. And they have been making this call loud and clear for a long, long time.
Is this surge in Russian missile strikes, Sergei, in some way serving a double purpose of Vladimir Putin? I mean, clearly upping the attack on Ukraine, but also perhaps taking the public focus away from what happened at Crocus City last week, where to all intents and purposes it seems that Putin and the FSB dropped the ball in not responding to that US warning about the impending terror attack.
Well, of course, the narrative in Russia with regards to the Crocus City attack has been that Ukraine is responsible for it. Now, that's preposterous from our side. We can see that this, this obviously was carried out by ISIS. But the Russian government's narrative is that Ukraine was responsible, the West was responsible, the United States and Great Britain were singled out in particular. And in this connection, intensifying attacks on Ukraine is a kind of a response that you can see that the Russian government is attempting to make to what they are claiming to the Russian public are acts of aggression from Ukraine. So this narrative kind of checks out for their domestic propaganda purposes. Now, the fact that it's preposterous is another matter altogether.
Indeed, and that in many ways fits in with a lot of the narrative that we've heard constantly coming from Russia on all matters relating to the invasion of Ukraine. Sergey, can I take you back a couple of days to the Russian cruise missile crossing into NATO airspace, i.e. over Poland? The Russian lack of response to that in terms of the ambassador refusing to reply to his summons by Warsaw. What do you make of that situation? Is this, again, Russia trying to sort of bluff its way out of the situation?
Well, it's not very clear what Russia is trying to accomplish here, whether this was on purpose or not, or simply accidental. This is not the first time this happens. And of course, it's extremely dangerous because what may happen is Russia may strike a territory of a NATO ally, which could potentially lead to escalation. I mean, the matter is extremely serious. The fact that the Russian diplomats in Warsaw are not reacting to summons by the Polish government, to me, seems it's arrogant. It's also childish to a certain extent, and I think it doesn't. It shows a kind of a disregard, bravado on the part of the Russians, as in we don't care about this, and we can go further and further in escalating this matter. Of course, that's a very dangerous game on their part.
Indeed it is. We're speaking, of course, Sergey, you and I, on the 20th anniversary of the entry to NATO of 7 former Eastern Bloc states. Many of those states will be, as you're aware, harbouring fears about what happens next in terms of Vladimir Putin's grand plan. What can reassure those states on their safety? I mean, clearly, the presence of NATO, the support of NATO, the support of Europe is something. But nonetheless, these countries which border Russia must have a great fear about what could happen next.
Well, precisely. The problem is we don't know what Vladimir Putin fundamentally wants. There are two ways of approaching this question. Some might say he just wants Ukraine. Now, that's a tall order. Do we want to give him Ukraine? I don't think we would. But there's another school of thought, and that is that he will not stop with Ukraine, but continue pushing outwards and perhaps, choose other soft targets like Moldova, or indeed even question the credibility of Article 5 and attack actual NATO allies like the Baltic states or indeed Poland. So under these circumstances of grave uncertainty about Vladimir Putin's intentions, what should be our reaction here in the West? I think the proper reaction is to show resolve and to show determination to push back against Russian aggression. I think there's already, we're seeing this in Europe. I think President Macron's statements that indicate sort of a degree of strategic ambiguity about what NATO might do or what France might do in case Russia continues its aggression, I think it's a step in the right direction.
So you'd support President Macron when he says that basically the idea of boots on the ground, the concept, they weren't his exact words, but he said nothing's off the table. And the implication of that is that there is a possibility that troops could be sent. Would you think that is the right thing that he said in terms of a position to take against Vladimir Putin?
I think it's the right thing because this is called strategic ambiguity, right? We don't exactly tell Vladimir Putin what our responses are going to be. Why is that? That is to keep him off guard and keep him on the safer side, I suppose. If he is not sure about what NATO's reaction is going to be, then perhaps he will act with greater caution and greater circumspection. Now, we can at least hope that he will. So the policy of strategic ambiguity is perhaps sometimes a better choice than the policy of strategic clarity, i.e. we will not get involved under any circumstances. Whatever Russian provocations, we will not get involved. That could potentially untie Putin's hand and actually move us closer towards a direct confrontation with Russia.
Professor Radchenko, thank you for joining us. Sergey Radchenko, a professor of advanced international studies at Johns Hopkins in the US, visiting professor at Cardiff University, joining us live there from Carnarvon up in North Wales. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Pleasure to have you here on France 24. Thank you once again.
Thank you for having me.
We, of course, continue to watch for all developments on the ground in Ukraine and diplomatically, of course, across the world.